Hello and welcome to the 9th video of making a WordPress Valentine's Day plugin. As always, the code that we've done so far is in the description below, so if you would like that code to program along with us, go to the link below and get that code. So the first thing that we want to look at first is what we're going to be making. Okay, so this is the plugin and widget that we've created so far. It's a changeable title with a number of different animational settings that we could do. So at the moment we've got some flying hearts. What I've done in this one is I've actually put two widgets. So there's two widgets in our WordPress website, and I did this to show you some of the code that or the reason why I've added some of the code the way I have. So this is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be using jQuery to finish this widget front end. So specifically in this video, we're going to be doing 5 tasks. We're going to be creating a new jQuery function, and then we're going to be using the each method to apply that to our DOM. We're going to be creating a JavaScript for loop, and we're going to be using that to add in our hearts. We're going to be creating our own random function, and we're going to be explaining the difference between the general JavaScript random method that we could use and our own one. Then we're going to be applying getting a random size heart and putting it into a variable. And the last thing is we're going to be appending a new container onto our widget's front end, which will be the heart, and this will have a random position and a random delayed animation. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Okay, so if we go into our code that we're using, we're going to be opening up the JavaScript folder, the JS, and we're going to be opening up the main JavaScript file. So we've double clicked here. This is the code that we've created from our last video. So the first task is we want to create our first each method. So what I would like to do is I'm going to put this at the top here. So after we've got the hearts, we want to say, so we want to use the selector again. So we're saying we're selecting the hearts in going through the DOM and selecting all the hearts classes, and then for each class we're going to create our own function to execute. So the reason why I've done it like this using this each is if there's 2 plugins and there's 2 heart containers, it'll take each of them in turn to execute. So that's why I've used the each method. So it takes the first container and it executes our function, and then it will take the second container and execute it. So we've completed the first task. Now what we need to do is create our JavaScript for loop. So what this does is it's taking the number of hearts that we're going to get from our setting page. So if that's either few, normal, or many, and so it's saying, well, you know, for each heart that's on here, loop around this. So we're going to loop it around each time. Okay. So we've done that. The next one is we're going to be creating our own random function, and I want to talk a little bit about the difference between mine and the JavaScript's built-in one. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to make sure that we can create our random function. So because I'm going to be creating a function outside of this jQuery document, it's going to have the full jQuery name. So do remember in the last video I talked about that because we've got this jQuery document and then I've put the $sign here. That means every time we need to use jQuery, either a method from that library or from that framework, we can use the $sign, which is the normal way of doing it in web development. However, outside of this, because the way that WordPress works, you need to use the full name, so jQuery. So we've created the random function that we're going to use. Now, if we look here, this is the normal JavaScript method for random. But what that generates is it generates a value from 0 point something or 0.1 to all the way between, well, there you go, returns a value between 0 and 1. So it could be 0.1, 0.2, 0.25, which is useful in some cases, but sometimes it can be a little bit annoying if you're trying to create values between certain values, for example. What this function does is it allows us to input the range that we want. So for example, if we go on to our next task and we want to create a random size for our heart, what we can do is we can put in the range that we want directly. Okay, so here again I've called my jQuery function, so inside it's the $, and then I've write the function name, and then I say the values that I want to be returned has to be between 5 and 35. Okay, so this is quite a common function that you'll see in many scripts. In fact, what we'll do is we'll go online to show where you can probably just copy this function directly. So here we are at W3 Schools. If you look at the JavaScript random here, like I said before, this returns a random number between 0 and 1. If you want to get it from 0 to 9, you could just times it by 10. If you want to get to 0 to 10, you times it by 11. If you want to get 0 to 99, you times it by 100. That is a little fiddly. So what people have done, if you go down to the bottom, is there's a proper random function that you can put in, and what this does is this puts it to the nearest integer, and then it allows you to choose between the maximum and the minimum. So you've actually got two here. We've got choosing between the maximum and minimum, but including the minimum but excluding the maximum, and this one includes both the minimum and the maximum. So this is the one that I chose, so I want to include both 5 and 35 when I'm choosing my size. Okay, so now in terms of our tasks, we have finished our fourth. And the last thing that we need to do is just append a new spam container onto our front end widget. And what this does is it allows us to just put boxes into it, and then we will in the CSS change those boxes to look like hearts. So we need to use the append keywords. So again, what we do here is saying this, and this just matches up to the function. So if you look, we're still in that function. So this is talking about that select, that item, that container that we selected from our function. And we're saying in this heart, I want you to append a new container. And this container will have these properties. Now, what I've done here is that I've used the random function again to position it randomly at the top. So I want to say it either is going to be below 200 or above 200, somewhere in there. And I've done the same with the left. So I've positioned it somewhere between these. And if you wanted to change the kind of positioning, all you need to do is change the range in here. And then for the width, the reason why I had to create a size variable is that the width and the height has to be the same, because we need a box to edit it within our CSS to make it shape like a heart, it has to be a box. So if I just put another random function in here, then the width and the height wouldn't align up. And the last thing that I've done is I've just made it a delayed animation. So what this does is that it works fantastically with CSS. So the CSS actually does the animation and it does the shapes. However, the jQuery, what I'm doing is I'm assigning it a random delayed start. So maybe a couple of the animations will start straight away. Some will start after a couple of, like after half a second or a quarter of a second or even 1.5 seconds. Okay, so I've used this HTML and jQuery and CSS to create the animation that we want. And the last thing that we need to do is we just need to make sure that we close this properly. So I'm going to get rid of this for now. And I'm saying, well, we need to close our for. So we're going to close our for. Then we need to close our function. And then we need to close our each method. So we close that each method. Then we need to close our function again. And then we need to close our ready jQuery method. Okay, so now we've closed everything up. That's all the jQuery that we need to make our animation. Okay, so before we stop the video, I think if you can answer these 4 questions, then you have a good understanding of what the code does and how you can use it. So if you stop the video and try and answer these questions. Okay, so hopefully you've paused the video. What does the each jQuery method allows us to do? Well, it allows us to iterate through all the items that have been selected. So for example, if we look here in this code, we're trying to look through it for all the list li in the DOM and the HTML, and then for each one we can do this function. So what this does is asking you just to kind of print out the text for each one. Now this each automatically has an index and it starts at 0, so it iterates through them. So the first value here will be 0, the second one will be 1, and it will continue. So for example, the result of this one will be print out the foo, because that's the first li. The second one will be printing out the bar. So that's what each does. Iterates through all the things that you've selected with your selector. Number 2, the second question. Why did we create our own random function? Well, if you look at this code here, we've said we've created a function here, and we want to get between 1 and 10. We know we can get 10 because we got the +1 here, so it's between the maximum, the minimum and the maximum, and it includes both the minimum and the maximum. So in our function here, we can say, well, what do we want the minimum to be? What do we want the maximum to be? Now, if we compare that to the code that we would have to write that would equal the same thing, so we put that code here, we need this code, and this code does the same thing. So if you're doing it once, you could probably just input this code and it wouldn't be a problem. However, if you are doing it like us, where you're doing it multiple times and the ranges change, it's just easier to make one function with the minimum and maximum and then use that function to apply, so you can put in the individual minimum and maximum range here. So for us, it makes it easier because we're doing it multiple times and our minimum maximum ranges changes. The third question, in the code below, what does this mean? Well, we use this with our plugin in OOP, and it refers back to itself. So in our plugin code, this was talking about the name of the class. In the function for JavaScript or jQuery, this is referring to the function's name. So for example here, going back to the code that we just saw in question 1, this is referring to the li. This is li. So for the first time it's iterating round, it's referring to the first li. The second time, this is referring to the second li. So it's a way of saying that it's linking itself to, I guess, the name of the thing that we've just called. And the fourth question, what does append do? Well, append allows us to create and add in content. So if we look here, and we have, let's say, this HTML, and we're saying, look, for this selector, append test. So what the new one will be is for each inner selector, we got the first one, we'll create or add in this test paragraph here. And for the second selector, we'll add in the same thing. So it just adds in, it creates content within your HTML. So that's all. We've finished our jQuery now. Hopefully now you are able to kind of start understanding how you can combine HTML, JavaScript and jQuery and CSS together to make really dynamic websites. If you have any comments, if you think we've accomplished all the objectives in the video, let me know. If you think there's any ways I can improve these videos, let me know. The next video we're going to go on to CSS. Now that the CSS is where we do all that magic of animation and making it look the way we want to look. So if you're interested in finding out how we finish this plugin, subscribe and I'll let you know when the next video is ready to be published. Thank you very much.